In this video, I'm going to show you how we can configure ISIS intermediate system to intermediate system between the P and C. You know that we can configure static routing or dynamic routing between the provider edge router and customer edge router. And you learn about how we can configure static routing, how we can configure RIP, how we can configure EIGRP, OSPF, and now I'm going to show you how we can configure ISIS between the P and C. This is the same scenario we configured before for EIGRP. Because of that, for some part of configuration, I'm going to use the notepad file of the EIGRP scenario, and for ISIS part, for the P and C routing protocol configuration, we can change the detail. Let me to first define the scenario. Here we have a service provider. In service provider, I'm going to use ISIS as IGP, and this is the IGP inside of the provider. But in this scenario, I'm going to configure ISIS between the P and C also. You know that in many cases we configured ISIS in the service provider as an IGP routing protocol, because we can use ISIS or OSPF as an IGP inside the service provider. But this is the first time we are going to configure ISIS between the service provider and also a customer. Let me to show you how we can configure. Here we have two customers, customer A and customer B. Customer A has two sites, site 1 and site 2. Customer B also has two sites, site 1 and site 2. This is the notepad file and this is the CLI. We can start the configuration. Starting from router 1, here we have R1, enconft, host name is R1, also ETH00, interface ETH00, configured with the IP address of 10.1.2.1.255.255.255.0. Then I configured ISIS network point-to-point, no shutdown, and also we have interface loopback 0 with the IP address of 192.168.2.541 with the mask of quad 255. Then here we configured ISIS, router ISIS. This is the net address of the router 1, and then IS type configured as level 2 only. Log adjacency change all is using for verification of logs, and then passive interface loopback 0 can help us to enabling ISIS on the loopback 0. Also, I enabled ISIS on the ETH00. This is the initial part of configuration of router 1. Let me to copy this part. After that, we can configure the router 2. This is the router 1 configuration, IP addressing, and then IGP routing protocol. Next, router 2. Router 2 has two interfaces, ETH00 and ETH01. enconft hostname R2, interface ETH00. This interface, IP address is 10.122.255.255.255.0. Then ISIS network type point-to-point, and then no shutdown. After that, interface ETH01. This interface, IP address 10.232, and then 255.255.255.0. ISIS network point-to-point and no shutdown. After that, this is the configuration of the ISIS, router ISIS, net address, IS type is level 2, and then log adjacency change all. Here we don't need the loopback interface, and also I enabled the IP router ISIS on the ETH00 and also ETH01, copying this configuration and pasting on the router 2. Now we expect to see one ISIS neighborship in router 2 between router 2 and router 1. As you can see here, we have neighborship. The next part of configuration is for R3. Here you can see enconft hostname R3, again interface ETH00 with IP address 10.343.255.255.255.0. ISIS network point-to-point this interface, and then no shutdown. And after that, I configured interface ETH01 with the IP address of 10.233.255.255.255.0. ISIS network type point-to-point and no shutdown. After that, router ISIS, the net address is configured, IS type is level 2 only, and log adjacency change all. After that, we have interface ETH00 and ETH01 with the IP router ISIS command. Copy this part of configuration and pasting on the router 3. After that, we expect to see another ISIS neighborship inside of the service provider. Okay, look at here. This is the, for example, ISIS neighborship. And also, in router 4, we configured enconft hostname R4 and then it interface ETH00, IP address 10.344.255.255.255.0, ISIS network point, no shutdown, and then interface loopback 0 with the IP address 192.168.254.255.255.255. Router ISIS. First, I configure the net address, and also IS type is level 2 only. Log adjacency change all. Passive interface loopback 0, because here we have passive interface. And also the IP router ISIS can configure ISIS on the ETH00, copying this part of configuration and pasting on the router 4. Now in router 4, we have the next neighborship, ISIS neighborship. Very good. And now we expect to see the loopback 0 of router 4 in router 1. Look at here. We can check it, show. For example, IP root ISIS can show us that we learned the 192.168.254.4 from the ISIS level 2, and then ping 192.168.254.4 source loopback 0. Look at here, we have connectivity. And now we can configure the next step. For example, BGP. Here we can configure BGP between router 1 and router 4, because we have connectivity between these two loopback interface. Router BGP 65,000, no BGP default IPv4 unicast. And then I configured neighbor 192.168.254.4 remote AS 65,000, and then neighbor 192.168.254.4 update source loopback 0, address family VPN v4 or address family VPN v4 unicast, neighbor 192.168.254.4 activated. Okay, this is the configuration of BGP until now in the router 1. Let me to copy this part of configuration on the router 1. After that, we have and we need the configuration of BGP on the router 4 with the router BGP 65,000, no BGP default IPv4 unicast. The neighbor is 192.168.254.1 with the remote AS 65,000, and then neighbor 192.168.254.1 update source loopback 0 address family VPN v4, and then neighbor 192.168.254.1 activate. That's it. Copying this part of configuration on the router 4. After that, we will have BGP neighborship for VPN v4. For example, in R1, we can use show BGP. Then VPN v4 unicast all summary. We have neighborship with router 4, and in router 4 show BGP VPN v4 unicast all summary. We have neighborship with router 1. That's it. Now we need to configure the MPLS LDP. Look at here. In the router 1, router 2, router 3, and 4, we need to configure LDP or MPLS on the interfaces. For example, we can use MPLS label range between 100 to 199 in the router 1, and also in the router 2 we can use MPLS label range between 200 to 199, and also in router 3 we can use between 300 and 399. In router 4, 400, 499. Let me to copy this configuration of the LDP on the router 1, router 2, 3, and 4. This is the router 1 CLI, conf t, pasting here. Then in router 2, we can use this command, MPLS label range, and after that router ISIS MPLS LDP auto config. Here, after some second, we will have we have the neighborship LDP neighborship, and also in the router 3 we can copy the configuration here again. Okay, very good. We have neighborship again. In router 4 we can copy the configuration and paste here, conf t. Yes, we have neighborship. Okay, after some second, very good. The next thing is configuring the VRFs. The VRF configuration is similar with the configuration in the EIGRP scenario. Because of that, I'm going to configure conf t VRF definition A with the RD65000 column 1 address family IPv4 unicast route target both means import and export 65,000 column 1. This is the RD and route and RT for customer A, and for customer B I'm going to use 65,000 colon 2. Then VRF definition B, RD 65,000 colon 2 address family IPv4 unicast route target both 65,000 colon 2. Also we have two interface ETH01 and ETH02. We configured with the VRF forwarding A, interface ETH01 configured with VRF forwarding A with the IP address of 10.155.255.255.255.0, no shutdown, and ETH02 configured with the VRF forwarding B IP address is 10.161.255.255.255.0, no shutdown. Let me to copy this configuration